Alrighty, today we'll be doing the mask from Majora's Mask. Now, I've printed this in Woodfill PLA. You can print this in anything you want. PLA, ABS, even the more exotic filaments like a bronze or copper fill, or even something just normal like a PETG. It turned out really nicely. I had my layer settings at layer heights of 0.2 millimeters. I had it set to one of the higher quality settings, so the print speed was a bit slow. I'd have to look up what the settings exactly were, but I was using Simplify 3D's high quality setting. It's only using about 15-20% infill, not much, but it has turned out really quite thick. It's surprisingly heavy, although that's something that you can pretty well say of any of the wood fills. So, what we're going to do is first we'll start off with sanding. I've got here a 120 grit, moving on to a 240 grit, and both of these I've not actually used this brand before. It's one that claims not to clog on very fine particulates such as plastics and paints, so we'll see. Then we move on to a 1200 grit, so very fine, and I use that just to finish things up very briefly before we then move on to painting. So we'll start off with that. Along the way, I might also be using my little side cutters in order to just nip off any hard edges, or I might even be using my scalpel just to clean those edges up as well. As for the other bits of kit that I'll be using, I've got my paint kits, and I'll get more into that as I actually start to paint. And between each layer of paint, I'll actually be blow drying it. Whoop. Not trying to hock any particular brand, but a hairdryer works great just to clean those layers down a bit, so that the next layer will go on both smooth without wrecking the one below it, as well as just focus. Jeez. As well as just making for a slightly nicer finish in the end. So that'll be used quite a bit. Alright, let's get started with the sanding. This is the 120 grit. And I'm just going to go fairly quickly with this one. We're not too concerned on the back side here on how softly we're going. So if you want, you can probably press a little bit hard just so you can start really getting up all those rough edges. Obviously, people are not going to be seeing the back nearly as much as the front, so the little minor imperfections that you introduce with this really rough sandpaper is probably going to really not matter too much in the end. We'll only be giving a very base coat to the back anyway, so you know, if you want to finish yours up a little bit better than this, by all means, but I'm probably not going to bother. Alrighty. Cue the time lapse. Alright, now on the front, the print layers have actually turned out very nicely. It's probably going to be a bit hard to show up on camera, but the actual way that the layers have gone down actually looks a lot like wood. So I'm probably not going to touch up the front too much, except where there's been obvious print errors. Like just across here where I'm scratching, there's a few little bumps where the wood fill has just bubbled up a little bit. So I'll give it a little bit of a touch up just on the sides of some of the spikes, But other than that, I'm probably not going to really do too much with this really coarse sandpaper. I don't want to discolor it too much. I really do like the way that it's come out. I've been very lucky with the way that it's printed, which took a while to actually get to print correctly at all. So sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. Alright, that's about as much as I'm going to do with that one. I'm not noticing too many other major defects on the front. The back is now pretty roughed off. I'm not feeling too many major problems on the back. If this was something that happened on the front, these big, obvious print errors, I'd have probably been fairly concerned. I would have sanded those right back flush, and I would have even gone and grabbed some Woodfill putty. You can actually use this Woodfill putty, go through all of that, and then once it dries a little bit like plaster of Paris, and then, but very quickly, and then you can go back and you can sand that flush, so that when you actually come to painting, you can't see it at all. It disappears. It's kind of magic. So, alright, that's the 120. Done with that one for now. We'll move up to the slightly smoother 240. Now I'm going to go over the back again. And this will just really smooth those edges off, so that anybody who's actually touching the model just has that extra little visceral feeling that's quite nice. As for the aesthetic, it's not going to change much on the back, obviously. But we're actually going to do a bit more of the front, because it shouldn't be as aggressive at biting in, and we hopefully won't lose any of that detail that I really, really liked. Alright, now I've gone fairly aggressively over each of the spikes. Well, almost all of them. But I'm going to go a lot softer. I'm just not going to push quite as hard once I actually go to the front face. Like I said, even though this is a 240, which is fairly fine, I am still a little bit worried that I'm going to scrape off that really, really nice detail. So I'm just going to go over it really, really softly, just so we can take off any hard edges that might have been there that shouldn't have been there. But look, I'm so happy with the way this is printed. I'm not going to do too much sanding with this one. I'm probably not even going to really touch it up too much with the 1200 grit. This has just blown me away how nicely it's printed. I normally have an absolute terrible time printing with this particular Woodfill. It's the only one I've printed in so far, but I have heard that Woodfill filaments can be annoying to dial in. But I spent quite a bit of time and I got it all, I think, pretty much the way that I want. And I mean, obviously I have it. It's done a wonderful job. So yeah, all we're doing now is just giving it a little bit of a smoothing. None of the details have to be roughed off, and I've said this so many times already. I'm really, really liking the way that each of the layers has gone down. It really does look like wood. So get all of the little bits out of the grain there, the faux grain. Now go through and we'll try and do the same on the back. Alright, that's as much as we'll do with the 240. Onto the 1200. Now, this is ridiculously fine. You can use this to polish fingernails. That's how fine it is. And there's finer still. But all we really want to do is just make it so that it has that bought feeling, you know? So we'll just give it a bit of a smooth on each of the horns. I'll probably go a little more aggressively than what I'm doing now. I'm going quite light. But I'll go a little bit harder on the back. And we don't, like I said, we don't want to take away too much of the detail. We want it to still feel like wood. But just giving a little bit of a pre-polish before painting, I think that's going to help. Especially because today I'm using acrylics. And acrylics have this nasty tendency to not build up layers very well. I've really got to invest in some decent enamel paint pots, the kind that you'd use for painting, say, Warhammer 40k figurines and the like. It just fills in those bad details a bit nicer, but you know, possibly at the sacrifice of some of the other woody details. So you know, acrylic is fine for today. Okay, that's enough for the front. I'll just try and get some of that fine dust out. And like I said, I'm going to go quite hard on the back. Just really, oh, that's coming up quite nice. Really go pretty tough, smoothing all that off. I think that's going to really leave a nice finish once we're done. Bit more. Alright, I think that's pretty much perfect. I'm not feeling any side wobble. The model sits nice and flat. This is a glass desk, so I think I should have a fair understanding of if it's not level, if it isn't quite sitting right. Alrighty. We'll pack these away. And I'll bring out the paints over here, and we'll start going over it. Now, I'm still humming and hawing over whether or not I give it a base coat of the brown, which in my case they call it burnt sienna, or if I give it a very, very light coating with a primer, a spray-on primer. Now, the spray-on primers can do a really good job making sure that the next layer sticks perfect. I mean, that's their whole job. They do it amazingly. But once again, they are also designed to fill the holes that might be being left behind by welding and things like that. But in our case, left behind by the print layers. And I really like those print layers. So look, I'm thinking I might just go straight to the burnt sienna. Alright, let's put it there for now and get everything packed away. I've had a bit of a look around at what other people have been doing, and it looks like the people who've chosen to base coat in white get a lot nicer finish. It really brings out the more subdued colours, which in my head I was going to use the brown to try and subtle off the really vivid colours, but it looks like the reverse might be a much better choice. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to coat it in a base of white, dry that off, and then brand new, and then we'll start adding in the detail. So this is baking paper that I've laid down specifically so I can just blob it out. Now, I can already tell I'm going to get a bunch of comments about how terrible my painting technique is, and I already know that. So, you know, feel free to leave me any suggestions on how I can improve in the comments below. I really should be using a much bigger brush for this, but here we are. Now, when you're painting through, really be sure that you don't leave any big cracks like this. Really make sure all those little cracks are being filled up with the paint. But you also don't want them to be overfilled with the paint and lose their detail. So, it'll get you coming and going, I suppose. So what I've chosen to do is just jab the bristles down pretty much straight at the surface that I'm trying to paint, and I'm hoping that that'll actually fill each of those little gaps in that I was warning you about. If anybody has a better suggestion on how you can do this, someone who, say, is an actual artist, feel free to drop me a comment below. Like I said, happy to learn new techniques, and I'm by no means an artist so much as just an enthusiast. Alright, just about done with that very first piece there. Now I'm just going to clean this off. Because I noticed a little bit of color seepage. Which, you know what? That's my mistake right there. I should not be using a dirty brush. So, lessons learned. Now I'm going to need a little more white paint. Just a little daub. I'm trying to use just a little bit each time, so that I'm not I'm not tempted to just gloop it on. I really want it to still pop with all those features, all that definition. So, oh, just bumped the camera with my face. Okay. Really gonna start pushing it down into each of those holes. And as you can see, it's not too thick a layer. Now, some people that I've had a look at while they've been doing their painting, they've actually used much thicker. So I think I'll probably do one, maybe two more coats of the white. We'll see. It depends on just how white it ends up being after probably one more coat. So I fully expect to do at least one more coat. Okay, that's coming through nicely. Don't want that to be too thick. Make sure we get right up under those spikes. That's pretty good. Alright. Get that bit there. Alright, this is starting to look pretty good. That very first coat. The coverage is coming through nicely, and I think I think the camera's picking it up. You can actually see the white is really, really nicely contrasting out all the different little facets that have printed. So you can see why I didn't want to lose them too much with the sanding. Alright, now I'm just going to go with the fake grain for a bit, just to make sure that they're all nicely filled, but not overfilled. That's working very nicely. Let's get right into that one there. Alright, that's looking pretty good for the main body's first coat. Now, as I mentioned before, I'll be utilizing a hairdryer. So, apologies for the sound. Alright, that's mostly dry. And it'll give me somewhere to actually hold on to while I paint each of the spikes without, you know, ruining the spikes. Or getting too much paint on my hands. Haha. Alright, get each of them done roughly, and then we can go back. Now, while I'm painting the spikes, I'll just mention how long the actual printing took, which, depending on your settings, of course, and how big you want this to print, like, at its longest edge, it is about 10 centimeters. Not huge. I have no idea what that is in inches for American viewers. Apologies. Now, I printed it, like I said, at about 0.2mm layer heights, and I did 5 top and bottom shells, or top and bottom solid layers, with I think 3 shells, and the total print time, and about 30%, or no, sorry, 15 to 25% infill. Now, the print time was crazy short. It was like 4.5 hours. Like I said earlier, the model will be in the description. I'll even have a bit of an outline of what my print settings were, just so everybody can have, if they like the way that mine's printed out, they can get as close as they want to that. Alright, the spikes are done. Now, rather than blow dry them, I'm just going to give them time to dry normally while I go back over the body. Alright, get a bit more paint out. Oh goodness. Now, since the first layer filled in most of those gaps, I'm being a little more roughshod about application, because I'm not as worried about there being a bright wood-coloured spot somewhere. But I am still trying to make sure that I don't fill in any of the any of that like nice wood grainy texture. So you just have to keep an eye on that, making sure you never get it just a bit too thick. But of course, apply it in whatever way you think looks best. Because even though we're doing a model from a specific series, there's kind of no right way. Lots of people have painted this mask in very different ways, and almost all of them look great. So, you know, get creative. Alright, just gotta get that out of there. I'm probably going to have to blow dry this side here, before I can move on to the other side, because I've just about run out of places to hold. But that white is giving a pretty good coverage. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to wipe a bunch of that excess off and really get into these holes at the top here. And these holes at the bottom. And what that'll do, just going nice and slow over them, is fill a bit further into the hole with white, but also make sure that none of them get blocked with the paint. So you don't want them to get blocked, it'll look weird. Now, yeah, I'm gonna have to blow dry that out. Now I should say that I don't have the heat going, because I've printed this in PLA, even though it's Woodfill. PLA has such a low melting temperature that you've got every chance that you can actually start to deform or weaken the model. You'll actually make it go soft, and when you start to work with it, you'll start to warp it in ways that it wasn't meant to be actually warped. So I keep the heat off and just give it nice broad strokes with that cool. And I've so far found that works great for just setting everything from these acrylics right through to spray enamels, and even paint primers have worked very, very well with that. So far, I haven't found a particular paint that if you have painted sensibly and don't have big, thick, droopy drops of paint everywhere, that it hasn't dried very, very nicely within probably a few minutes, as opposed to, you know, in some of those cases, those enamels can take hours to set if you don't follow it up with a dryer of some kind. Some people might be tempted to use a heat gun. I would not. Most of those heat guns have the base temperature of like anywhere between 75 and 150 degrees Celsius, and like PLA starts to get soft at about 130. So be warned. Even if you go with something like ABS or PETG, you're still going to find that a heat gun is just going to be too much. But you can use that heat gun to get rid of any stringing. Just giving it a few brushes over very, very quickly. I find with the hottest, the 300 degree temperature setting, which is the highest mine goes to, if you're very quick, just it should be plenty enough. All the strings will melt back into either flat flush PLA, or, you know, whatever you happen to have used, or at worst, it'll ball back up. It'll just be a little drop on the side, and you can wait till that's set, and you can even just crack that off with a fingernail. Otherwise, you can just use something like the snips. Get them off, scalpel, pare it off, whatever you're more comfortable using. Alright, this is looking pretty nice now. I'm not seeing much of the colour fall through anywhere. Just going to thicken this side up a bit. Now there was a very small print defect just across here, and I'm just noticing that the paint has pretty much removed that, which is awesome. Really happy with that. It was a print defect that really sanding was not going to alleviate unless I was willing to really shave that side off. You really needed to add something in to get that sorted out. Those with keen hearing can probably hear my cat complaining that she got locked out of the room. Alright. Now, remember before when I said I wasn't sure if I was going to do another 2 layers or if I thought this one was enough? I think I might just do a half layer, a really, really, really thin one over the patches that I've either gone too thin on or have just not given enough coverage. So areas like just here, and that this is a bit of a constant battle for using acrylic as your base coat. You've just got to keep making sure that all these little nooks and crannies do actually get filled in appropriately. Well, it's my constant battle. I'm not afraid to go a bit thick on these bottom parts. They're less in line of sight for most people, so it's not going to really stand out when somebody grabs a hold to have a look at the model. And just get right in there. Really flick that through. Now I'm just trying to hold it by the spikes for now. Right at the tippy tips. Because I don't want to have to grab the dryer just yet. Until I've gotten all these extra little bits sorted. But it is obviously still quite wet. I'll sort that out. There we go, bring that all the way into that little gap. I'm just noticing this side here is a bit thin. It's a bit thin there too, but that's probably fine. Alright. That's mostly got this part sorted out. Not seeing any other spots across the side here that have got just way too thin layers. I think that's pretty well sorted that. Now, as I said before, I'm just going to do a little bit of spot fixing, just so everywhere has a nice thick coat. Some bits look great, and I just see a couple of little spots where just might want it a little bit thicker. Once again, this base coat has really illustrated all the highlights, like the shapes around the eyes, the shape coming in under the eye, leading down to the bottom spikes. The holes themselves have really come out, and I'm just going to make sure I got these holes fully covered. pretty nice. Get really close into those little gaps there. Just a little more on this side here. Looking pretty good. I'm going to have to go and look after that cat, aren't I? She's very upset being left out of being able to paint with me. That might be the saddest cat in the entire world. Alright, I'm going to let that air dry for a little bit. I'm going to go and sort that cat out. Alright, I'm back. I've given the cat a bit of a cuddle. I think she's going to be okay. I think really she just wanted food. So, I've gotten back. It's still a little bit too wet to really handle, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a blast with the blow dryer again. Alright, as it's dried, I've actually noticed that just around this eye is still a bit thin. Let's give that another coat. And now that it's dry, I might just give it a bit of an eyeball around the other sides as well. That's looking pretty good. Oop, there's a spot there. Just make sure that gets looked after. Yeah, that's better. I think the coverage is pretty good now. Alright, I'll let this dry. By let, I mean force. And then we'll get on to actually applying some of the colour. Should be pretty dry. Doesn't feel... Oh, there goes the hairdryer. Doesn't feel too tacky, so that's good. Now, as I've said the words add some colour, I've realised I haven't actually done the back. Now the back I want to basically just be this brown. You won't often see the back, so I'm not too concerned. Just going to get a little bit of that out. Like I said, I was fairly unconcerned on the whole about how the back was going to turn out. But equally, you don't want the back to just be a dirty mess of white and overhang colour. Something nice and dark to blend with, I think might actually work quite nicely. But you know what? I am not an expert. So, let's give this a bit of a go. I'm going to be fairly thick with it. That is not nearly enough. Now, I'm a little nervous about getting these edges done, because with my big clumsy hands, I'll go right over the side, and then I'll have to wait for a whole new set of layering to be done with the white, just to hide the mistake. Okay, I'm going to hit that with the hairdryer. Alright, to another coat. Now, I've also changed my mind about how I'm going to handle the back of these spikes. Now, my original plan for the back of the spikes was to paint them in the same brown as I'm painting the rest. I've changed my mind. I'm going to actually paint them white, and they'll get their correct colouring all the way around to the back now. But it does mean I've now got to repaint them, or paint them in white. So hopefully I don't mess up too much of the brown when I do so. Alright, it's not entirely dry, but it's dry enough for me to give maybe one more coat. And then I'll dry it all the way. And move on to the front, move on to the spikes. The back of the spikes. Really trying to get rid of those print errors now. So, alright, that looks fine. Fine enough. I'll get that entirely dried now, and we can move on to painting the rest of the spikes from the back side, and then we can move on to colouring. Actually, while I do that, I might just clean this up, ready for the next bit. Alright, I'll just leave that to soak. Leave that to soak in here. Alright, there's still a couple of little spots there that just, they were the really thick parts, and they're not quite dry yet. But overall, I think it's probably dry enough. The rest will dry off as we do the spikes, I think. Alrighty, let's make sure the paintbrush is nice and clean, so we don't get cross-contamination like I was getting a little tiny bit of before when we were doing the front face, the first layer of the front. work all that brown out. Okay. Back to the white. And that is just hugely too much white, but here we are. Now I'm going to be pretty thick with the white on the back. One, because I've, dumped out way too much. But two, once again, just filling in any of those little errors that might have turned up. Those little print errors. That on the front just about don't exist. On the back, I wasn't too concerned about. Oh, look at that. I've already gone over. Let's just see if I can dab that off. And try again. That's a bit better. Not great, but it'll have to do. Get that on there nice and thick. Now I might have to hold it precariously from the bottom there. With my shaky hands, this increases my risk of painting over the wrong spot by about 300%. Oh well, do what we have to do. He says, knowing full well that he could just grab the hairdryer and dry the previous ones off and continue, but anyway. Things like that are for clever people. That's going down nicely. Yeah, that's pretty good. One of the better first layers, I'd say. Really wish I'd decided to do this before painting the brown. Once again, forethought is for smart people. Close up all these little gaps. Alright, that's not too bad. That's way too much. I'm just going to go around and make sure that the brown hasn't come past its lines. I'm just doing that visually. And I'm going to make sure that the spikes definitely have a nice coating of the white, because that'll be the first thing we paint. And they'll be painted yellow as they're secondary base color. Ooh, this is going to be tricky to pick up. Not too bad. Better than I expected. Alright. That's the mask. Primed. Okay. Now, it's still a little bit tacky. I hit it with the hairdryer off camera a little, but I'm going to just do it again. Make sure that we get all that tackiness off. We don't want it to be smearing the colors when we put down the yellow. Alright, that's pretty good. Now, the yellow I have isn't in these super awesome little handy tubes. No, instead, it's in this big Hawalapan bottle. It's basically Pikachu yellow, so I think it should work pretty good. Let's just get some of that down. Now we're going to need quite a bit, but I really didn't need to put down such an enormous amount, did I? That seems to be my catchphrase. Alright. Tackiness seems to be pretty low. I'm not feeling any around the edges. The paint doesn't seem to be tacky around any of the spikes now, which is good. Alright, I'm just going to wipe my hands a little, see if I can keep any of the oil and grease and other colours to a minimum. Alright, onto the yellow. Now, I think I'm going to paint the bottom ones first, and I'll work my way up. Now you don't have to go super fast here. So just take your time. Make sure everything's filled. Let's have a look. That's pretty good. I'll do the underside separately. Not as separately as I did the white on the underside. Lessons learned. I think that's looking pretty good. Not seeing too many blank spots for a first pass. That first couple of layers of white has really, really helped. Just make sure that it doesn't look too thin, despite how thin it really is. Cool. Alright. Now, I've given the spikes a little bit of time to settle. I'll do the top ones. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, I'll just let that dry naturally, and I'll start filling in some of the yellow around the eye, on the eye itself, down across the face masky part here. So I'll get started on that. Let's start with the eye. Once again, trying not to lose some of those really gorgeous print lines in the process. So I'm trying to keep it thick to keep the color nice, but not too thick so that we fill in those gaps. One of the nice things about acrylic though is that as it dries, it does shrink quite considerably. So it's not the end of the world if you do accidentally fill one all the way up and you can't squeege that bit of paint out. It will mostly settle out as the water dries out of it. Yeah, not my worst work, so I don't know, take the good with the bad. I'll just bring that out a little bit like I did with the other. Square that off a bit. Alright. Ooh, that spot there looks a bit thin. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, I might just dry this layer. And once this layer is dry, I'll hit it with another layer, just to make sure that it's nice and thick, and that the very end comes up like nice and rich and shiny. Alright. Grab that. Just blown my brush into that ruddy white, which I should clean up. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean it up. I'll just spread it nice and thin, and it'll dry out nice and quick that way. At least it was white and not brown, I suppose. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with the way the yellows come up now. So I'm going to switch over to doing the red pieces, which are the parts around the eyes, back down around the mouth area here, and it basically just comes to where these lines meet and down. Now, the reason we've put the yellow down is so that we can really get that red popping. I think it's going to look really nice. The red that I've got is called Deep Red. To be honest, it's a little bit of a coldish red. So that was another reason why I was really keen to get this yellow down all the way across here, just to warm that red back up. Alright. Okay, so we've got the red in, we've got the yellow in. The next I'll do is I'll get some of the black inlay that sits just down the corner of those eyes. It'll only be a tiny, tiny, tiny little amount, so hopefully it won't take very long at all. And then I'll start filling in the blue, which is basically the rest of the mask. Let's get this all cleaned up. Red's always the hardest one to get off the brush. And we'll grab the black. Put a little tiny dollop down. We really don't need too much at all of the black. We'll probably need a bit more than that though. Okay, get the tip back into a little point, because I'll need it to be nice and fine. Wish me luck. I've just done a bit of a mischief here, so let's see if I can just cut that down. Okay, not too bad, not great though. I'm not super happy with the way that turned out, but hopefully I can fix it up a bit later. Alright. Might just go back over the yellow, just because I've sort of bled a little bit more than I was expecting onto them. Get that tip up. Alright. That's cleaned it up at least. Now for the blue. Now the blue that I have is called Ultramarine, but pretty much any darkish blue should be fine. But if yours isn't quite dark enough, you can always add a bit of black. If it's not quite warm enough, add just a touch of yellow or red. just very, very fine amounts until you get the color you like. I'm probably just going to put this down raw, exactly the way it is, and we'll see how that looks, and fix it by layering if I... Alright, with the blue basically done, and not looking too bad, I'm going to move on to adding just a touch of orange, straight up orange, and that'll go onto the top spikes, just around the base of them. Not actually on the spikes themselves, just around the base. Alright. Now that we've got the blue done, and it's not looking, too bad, not great, not too bad, I'm just going to put the tiniest little piece of orange, as you can see, orange, and it's going to go in a bit of a square pattern, pretty much where the yellow is around the top here, but not on the spikes themselves. So let's just go ahead. The tiniest little dollop out. I needed about half that, but anyway. I'm just going to clean this blue off. Gotta get the blue off as much as I can. Don't want to contaminate it. Right, now I might just use this. That's to try and get any of the remaining blue off. Right. Now, there's a little bit of a handle in here, so I might just utilize that. Alright, that's not too bad. The orange is so thick. I don't know if I really need to do any more layers. I think I like the way that it's blending through. Alright. Now, the next thing that we'll have to do from here is we'll go through and we'll bring the red right up around the eyes. And then I'll start layering a little bit of orange and red up just to bring that really intense look to the eyes that the mask has. So let's get that. Let's start on getting a little of that red back up and around. really taking care not to bring too much onto the eye just yet. But a bit of spill is not going to be the end of the world. Thank goodness, otherwise I'd never be able to finish this thing. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Might just thicken it up at this point here. Little wee dab. Bring that around. That looks pretty good. And I might just sort that out. Yeah. The tiniest little bit over here as well. Alright, time for the next time. Just get a nice big dab happening in there. And just nice and steady. Reapplying when we need it. That's not too bad. Come around from this side. Oh. That went on quite nicely. Alright. Alright, not too bad. Not too bad. So, what I've done, as you can see, is I've just brought it right out to these edges. And that's so that in a few seconds, when I go back over some of this with black, some of these edge lines with black, it's really going to make them stand out. Cool. Alright. Well, I'll just let that dry for a tick, and we'll get on to just putting a little bit of the black around those rims, and then we'll get right stuck into that eye cup. Alright, moment of truth. So I've just mixed a little bit of this yellow with the orange. I'm just going to put a bit of water in there just to really thin it out. You really don't want it too strong. I'm really afraid it's going to be too strong. Right, let's give this a go. I really want it to be weak. That's not too bad. I think that's probably the best I'm going to be able to do. I am so bad at this. Okay. Maybe just with a little bit of water. That was way too much there. It's not too bad. Okay. Alright, time to move on. Now, the next part, I said I was going to do the black outlining. I think I'm going to leave that till a bit later. I'd like it to be the last thing, now that I really think about it properly. If I make it the last thing, it can correct a lot of the mistakes that I've made crossing those flippin' lines. So, I'll leave that till last. Now what I'll do is, I've got to paint these spikes now. Now, this is probably going to be another really hard one for me to do. If only because I'm really bad at color theory. What I might do is take... I'll use a green. I'll use a red. Now, I think the other color might be a grey, and I don't actually have a grey, so I'll have to make one. Alright, I'm going to pause the video there while I let this set. I don't want to move it around too much with the hairdryer this time, just because there is still a little bit of actual visible moisture, and because I've been using straight water, it could get pushed around. I don't want it to do too much damage, so I'm just going to leave it there while... Okay, I've made up some grey. It is thick, so I am pretty afraid of it. I'm going to really try to water it down, because for this part, we just want it to look streaky. We don't really want it to be a thick coating. And it's just... Oh, looks like it might be a bit hard for me to actually do this part. Alright, that's pretty thin. Let's just try a little bit of white. Still pretty thick. Okay, let's give this a go. Actually, I might just get all of that thick paste off. That's not too bad. It's better than I thought it was going to be. I really want it to be a bit streakier than that, but just so afraid of it. Ugh. That's better. That's as streaky as I wanted it. I just have to really jab, get that effect I'm looking for. Ugh, too high. Alright, wash this off. Soak that up. Alright. Might just see if I can... That's not too bad. That's not too bad. It's a bit thicker than I wanted, but to get the effect that I was looking for, I think that's gonna have to be okay. Then I'll get the green and the red ones in once these are fully dried. Like with the eyes, I'm terrified that if I use the blow dryer, I might distort some of it just because it's actual water on there. So I'm going to leave it to sit naturally, drying, and then we'll sort it out from there. Alrighty, now that's had some time to dry off. I'll go on to doing the other spikes. So the next one I'll do will be the red one, And I'll try that same sort of splashy technique to see if I can get it the same way. Add a bunch of water in. Now, I'm just going to test that on a little bit of white. Maybe I'll try this white over here. That's not too bad. Alright. Maybe just a little more red back in there. Not wonderful, but it'll have to do. I'll go back now. Alright, onto the green. I'm just going to pack these two away. Pop the red away. Grab the green. Oh, going to take that seal off. Here we go. Tiny little bit of green. Way more than I needed, but that's how much came out. I'm just going to take about that much. Put it there. Grab 2 dollops of water. Alright. Now, just going to get that sort of mushed. Just a tiniest little bit. I might even try that with the red, just grabbing that tiny little bit on the end as well. Just the tiniest little bit on the end and mush. Tiniest little bit, mush. I'll be honest, it didn't come out quite as nice as I was hoping, but hopefully I can sort of, oh, that's way too wet, sort of meld it a bit. Yeah, that's better. That's a lot better. Alright, I'm not too upset by that now. Now, the next part I should probably do is there's a little pattern of green that's got to go in through here and basically down to this yellow line. So just across here on both sides, it's the barest, tiniest little amount of green. And I'm terrified to put it down. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to not look terrible. And swoop that back around to here. Tiniest little bit. Swoop that around to there. Alright, now I've accidentally pushed too far on that, so I'm just going to see if I can wipe that back. There we go. Alright, that's not great, but it's not terrible either, so I'll move on to the other one, and I might have to do a second layer. Alright. Alright. Not great. Not terrible. Now, I'm going to clean this all the way down so that it's fully dry. Then grab some of that green for the second layer. Not too bad. This green that I've got, yours might be fine, but I'm finding this one a little bit hard to layer. It's just not covering very well compared to the others. Alright, not too bad. Next is an incredibly fine line of kind of a purpley colour. Now, I've actually got a purple, but it's going to need to be violet. But it's going to need a little bit of work. I think I'm going to have to add just the tiniest little bit of white. It's just a bit too vibrant. Ooh, goodness, I'm running out of space. Here will do. Yeah, that's more than enough. Wind that up. Grab a touch of white. Alright. Let's see if that's going to be okay. It's getting better. I think that'll be okay. Yeah, that's probably going to be fine. Alright. Just so I can start fresh. I'm going to get rid of all of that. Wipe it all back. Pray to the modelling gods, and they've answered. They've said no. Alright, quickly patch that green up, and very quickly try and get rid of where I've smudged the green. Okay, that actually came away a lot nicer than I thought it was going to. So, back to the green. Paint that back in. And because that was a solid color, right, that's close, and I've just started noticing that as it's drying, it's actually going very dark. I guess because of the blue below. So I'm just going to repaint those. Give them an extra layer again. Hopefully it'll brighten them up a little. Just going to do that. Try and get that back to a point. Mussed it around so much it's starting to fray. Alright. Grab This is the first time I've had such a different set color from acrylic. I'm used to them staying quite bright. So alright. It's not totally set because it's so thick, but hopefully it's stable enough that I can actually... Oh, that was a mistake. Hopefully it's stable enough I can actually start to paint that lilac around the edge. Alright. Pick this up. The lilac's starting to set a little bit, that's okay. We just need a little bit. It's a bit too much. That was not wonderful. I have to try and erase a little bit of that. That was really shoddy. Alright, a little bit of water, dab it down, chase the line back up. There we go. That's a lot better. Just thicken that back up again. Alright. That should be it for the lilac. Now, now it gets a little bit harder. There's a super light amount of blue that would normally come sort of down, around, down, around, kind of arrow shaped through here. On this particular model though, it doesn't already have the marks, so I'm wondering if I should even keep going on and try. There's a good chance that I'll freehand that into oblivion. Yeah, I might just give that a miss this time round. And I think I'll move straight on to putting the black outline around all of that. So, looks like the black that we had over here has actually been dried up. So I'll just put a new dab down. Now black is one of the scariest freaking things to use. Because as soon as you mess up, you know you've messed up. So what I'm going to do is set everything for a few minutes using the hairdryer to make sure that I can erase it if I've just totally messed it up. Alright. Hopefully that's going to be enough. Now, I've been a bit harsh on this brush, so I'm going to have to try and coax all of its stray hairs back together before we start. Because the tighter the tip that we can achieve, the better those black lines are going to come out. Alright, just a little dab. And we'll start where we've already been. Just re-blacken that up. Now you may not have to do this if yours was actually done, you know, neatly the first time when you did the eyes. but I am not quite that good. So I've got to redo them. Tiny little strokes with a tiny little bit at the tip. It's going to take a lot longer than I thought though, but you know what, I think it's going to turn out a lot better for it. Well, just messed that up. Alright. Full dab of water. Take most of it back off. Now I find it's easier to stroke downwards. I don't know if that's science or anything, but it's certainly what I find to be the easiest. And look at that. Just mucked that part up. Less talking, more painting. Alright. Take a little bit of water, dab it off, chase the black back up, 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 up. Alright, now that we've got that part, we've just got to do a little bit of a squiggle around each of the eyes. And the black is mostly done. If I just do... Not too shabs. Alright, only parts left to do are the very dots in the eyes. And that's about it. If I just... I'm not liking the way the tip's sitting. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black all the way around it. And I'm going to just wipe it off. And that's just pasted it all down. See how the hairs aren't sticking out anymore? Now if I just train that back into a point. Grab some black. Now because this model already has the holes in there, you don't want to add too much extra black. Basically just enough to really offset that deep yellow that we've put in there. Put just a little bit of black around the edge there. Alright, not too bad. You can still kind of see the yellow down the hole though. So I'm just going to really just dump a big blob in each. That'll hopefully accent the black a little bit. Alright. Now traditionally this model also has some black across these top parts. It's so small and fiddly, I don't think I'm going to attempt it. Other than that, we're pretty close to done. I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this all with the hairdryer. Once it's set, I'm going to clear coat it with just a basic spray-on clear coat. Once that's done, it's all done. Alright, I'm just going to pick up the hairdryer. Actually, what I might also do is go down and fill all these parts with blue just before we set it. Oh, looks like our blue's dried. And that'll just clean up all the edges around the spikes. Once again, get it all the way up to a nice fine point. Use thick, even strokes. He says, not paying attention to his own advice. It's a bit better. Like I did with the black, I'm just going to go all the way around and then just dab that off, centering it each time, and that'll bring it into a nice point. We can go on to the next one. Bottoms are done. Now I've just flattened it, so it's a nice flat point. I'm hoping that might just make the job a little easier for me. Not great. I'm just going to go back to the black. I'm just going to trace this line out. Alright, it's turning out pretty well. I think that part there, I think several of these parts are probably going to need a couple of go-overs. The red shows through very, very strongly on this part. Now I'm just going to get rid of that mistake. A little bit of water. Pretty good. You know what? Maybe I will try those fiddly bits at the top. I said I wasn't going to. You know what? I think I'm going to now. So I'll need a bit more. Ooh, this orange is getting manky. Let's throw down some more orange. I'm gonna need some. Just gonna put down a little tiny bit. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these out to about here and into about like there. Do it with the fresh stuff. That wasn't too bad. Bring that all the way down to there. Alright, I've spread those over. Now I'm going to have to dry them off because they get little black divots drawn on. Let's see what we can do. Nope, didn't get any of that off properly. Yeah, that's better. Alright, let's get the black. And two tiny little ones there. It actually needs a bit more drying, but we can probably get one, two, and one. That one's getting a bit manky. Two. You can barely see the second one on the left side of the right piece. So I'm going to have to put some more orange down there. And try it again. Of black. I'm going to just bring it into that flat shape again. Let's see if I can just be really, really sneaky. Blink. No. Too sneaky. There we go. Better. Not wonderful, but not too bad. Just going to clean this off, and what I've got to do is make a slightly lighter blue. That should be enough. Whoa, possibly too much. Oh no, it's darkened up again. Cool. Here goes nothing. What I've got to do is I've got to bring a little line down, over, and then arrow it back across. Bring it down into here. Messed that up royally on that side, so we try again. We just remove all the blue. Just going to put a dab of water in that so it doesn't all dry out. Okay, remove the blue. Water, remove, and remove it. Here we go, like it never happened. thought this was going to be a bit tough for me. Not great. Not great, but I gave it a shot. So I'm going to dry this off now. And then I think it's time to sand a little bit of the back and then lacquer. Not quite drying the way I thought it was going to, but not too bad. Still not too bad. Ah, and there's something I've forgotten to do. Paint Majora's mask's green eyes. Okay, I gotta get it really fine, so I'm just going to really, really carefully get a point. Just really softly go around the outside of that. It's a bit messy. And that side is just hopeless. I've got the green in. I'm wondering if I shouldn't just put the tiniest little black ring around that, just to really accent it. The original does have that little black ring. The actual mask texture does include it. I'm going to have to get some more black. It's just I'm so hesitant to go adding black at this stage. One slip and she's all over. What I might do is that same flattening I've been doing. Don't know if I like the way that one turned out. Might have to touch that up in a sec. Not too bad. Not too bad. The green is much darker once it sets than I was expecting. I really thought for something called mid-green, and considering the colour that you can see through the tube, I thought it was going to be a lot lighter than that. Otherwise I probably would have yellow and whited it a little just to make it sort of greener. Anyway, doesn't matter. Alright, time to dry. Alright, it should be pretty much dried. So, what I'm going to do is very carefully sand back some of the stuff from the back. Now, to do that, I'm going to use that 1200 grit that we started with. Just really softly work the back. I don't know how much it's really going to help, but if I can bring back most of it to be at least back to level with either the brown or the level before the brown, I'll be happy enough. At least if I can get it back to the brown, I can just repaint the brown as the finishing. It'll be fairly slow going. Because acrylic is a little bit resistant to sanding, no matter how dry it is. It tends to prefer just to flake up. So, you've got to take it really slow, and that's why I've chosen a 1200. Because it's so fine, I don't think it would give it much of a chance to flake up. Alright, not too bad. Not too bad. I might grab out the brown again. And we can just touch those points up. Grab it from the corners. There we go. Make sure it's nice and dry. And just repaint. Alright, now what I might do is take a little bit of just painter's tape, and I might just double side that to the bench. I'm probably going to have to do it a little bit low so that it actually sticks. Now, very gently. All right. Now I'm just using a quick dry multi-purpose enamel. So, here we go. Now what I've done is I've started off the page, off the model, sprayed across and then stopped and done the reverse. Now doing that, make sure that you don't get any of the stop-start marks that typically really look bad on something like this. Alright, so I'm going to give my bench a quick wipe, get as much off as I can, and then we're going to dry it. And it should be okay to actually dry with the hairdryer. I'm not seeing any bubbling, so it should be okay. Alright, let's try another layer. Alright, now it's not completely dry. You can tell because the areas in the overspray are still quite tacky. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but they're still a bit tacky, a bit sticky. It'll take probably another few hours to properly set, outgas, and cure. But yeah, no, I think this has turned out really, really nice. I'm just going to bring it up, preferably straight up from the bottom. That way we don't touch too much of it. And there we go. Alright everyone, this is what we started with on the right. Here's what we ended up with on the left. I think that's a pretty good job. I reckon that if I can do it, most of you should be able to manage as well. And that looks really cool, especially compared to just the plain old one, which, you know, even just a very simple plain version of this mask would probably look pretty kick-ass. It's a great design and a great game. So, thanks for watching. Make sure that if you loved it, hit like and subscribe. If you hated it, tell me why in the comments. If you reckon you can do better than me, send me a link. I'll always give shout-outs to the people who've done the same thing but better. And thanks for watching. See ya.